Everything you see was bought with blood. Not sweat. Not tears. Blood. Ezra Ademola stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights sprawled beneath him like fallen stars. 40 stories below, a glass of 30-year-old scotch untouched in his hand. At 45, Ezra had acquired the polished sheen of old money, though his wealth was barely a decade old. His tailored suit cost more than what most families earned in a month. The watch on his wrist could have purchased a small house. Behind him, the penthouse stretched in minimalist luxury, Italian marble, custom furniture, original artwork worth millions. Every detail carefully selected to whisper rather than shout of his immense wealth, the home of a man who had transcended the need to prove himself. Ezra turned from the window and moved silently through the dimly lit space to the master bedroom. The door opened without a sound on perfectly balanced hinges. Inside, Miriam lay asleep, her face serene in the soft glow of the city lights filtering through the windows. At 43, she remained beautiful, more so, perhaps, than when they'd married 2 decades earlier. But there were new lines around her eyes that hadn't been etched by laughter. He approached the bed carefully, not wanting to wake her. The silk sheets rose and fell with her breathing. Gently, he touched her cheek, allowing his fingers to linger for just a moment. Her skin was cool against his palm. She didn't stir. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though not quietly enough that she wouldn't hear if she were awake. Ezra checked his watch, 11:30 p.m., and turned away. He moved through the apartment with practiced stealth, retrieving a different jacket from a hidden closet, one less conspicuous than his usual attire. In the elevator, he pressed the button for the underground garage rather than the lobby. There would be no witnesses to his departure, no security footage. He had ensured that years ago. The black SUV waited in its designated spot, windows tinted beyond the legal limit. Ezra slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove toward the service exit. The guard nodded as the gate raised, trained not to notice the comings and goings of the building's most prominent resident. The digital clock on the dashboard read 11:42 p.m. He had time. He always had exactly the time he needed. This far from downtown, the streets narrowed, shadowed alleys branching between buildings like capillaries from a vein. Trash collected in corners. Figures huddled in doorways glanced up as the expensive car passed, then looked away, survival instinct warning against noticing too much. Ezra parked in his usual spot and killed the engine. The dashboard clock read 11:58 p.m. He sat motionless, hands still gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the alley visible through the windshield. Then, exactly at midnight, he stepped out of the vehicle and walked toward the darkness between buildings. Every night at exactly midnight, billionaire Ezra Ademola visits this mad woman Amara. Always when he got there to give her food and some clothes, he thought he could go ahead and make love to her according to what the clan has instructed him to do if he really wants to have another child, but his conscience and heart couldn't stop thinking about his wife and his daughter, about the pains and damage he had caused them already and yet again, trying to add more sins to his. The alley smelled of urine and rotting food, the ground sticky beneath Ezra's imported leather shoes. Rats scattered as he approached, the beam of his flashlight sending them squeaking into crevices. He moved with purpose, counting his steps until he reached the familiar alcove, a forgotten doorway to a building long abandoned. She was there, as always, huddled beneath layers of mismatched clothing despite the warm night. Her matted hair hung in clumps around a face that had once been beautiful before life and something else had carved deep lines into it. She rocked slightly, murmuring to herself, eyes fixed on something no one else could see. "Amara," Ezra said softly. Her rocking stopped. Slowly, she raised her head, dark eyes focusing with unnerving clarity. "The man who sold what wasn't his," she whispered, her voice surprisingly melodic. "Back again for what you can't buy." Shockingly for Ezra, the mad woman could see what he was battling with, and all the hidden secrets he thought no one else knew about was known to the mad woman. She could sense the fear and pain from looking in his eyes. Ezra crouched before her, keeping a careful distance. "How did you know about all of this? Do you know what I came here for? Please, I'm not here to harm you, I won't hurt you," he ranted. Amara's laugh was brittle. "How does the hollow vessel feel? How does the shadow feel when the light is gone?" Her hand shot out, fingers grasping Ezra's expensive watch. "Time. Time. Always checking the time. But time isn't yours either, Richmond." He gently disengaged her fingers. Up close, he could see that despite her circumstances, her skin remained smooth, her eyes bright. There was no smell of alcohol or drugs about her, only the scent of the streets and something else, something like ozone after lightning. "I brought you food," he said, placing a package beside her. "And fresh clothes." Ezra's gaze was on Amara and afraid she could jump up and bite him or do something dangerous to him. He was so afraid, but when he thought about the consequences of his actions, he has no option rather than to summon up courage and get the mad woman to be at peace with him so he can have a chance to execute his evil plan. Suddenly, she leaned forward, her face inches from his. "Your wife cries every night. I hear her across the city. Her tears are louder than sirens." Ezra stood abruptly, taking a step back. "Please eat your food. I have no bad intentions towards you. I'm here to help you and make you get better." While he was saying all of this, his heart was racing so fast and he couldn't think of anything else other than his wife and daughter. He did not even care about all the wealth, fame, authority, control, and access he had in top places and authorities at that time. They all meant nothing to him. Ezra checked his watch again. "I'll come back tomorrow night. Please eat." As he turned to leave, her voice followed him, suddenly clear and commanding, the voice of the woman she had been before. "Every empire built on blood drowns in it eventually, Ezra. Even yours." He walked faster, not looking back even when he heard her begin to wail, a sound too ancient and knowing for this world. By the time he reached his car, his hands were shaking. The digital clock read 12:17 a.m. 17 minutes. Each visit was 17 minutes, no matter how brief the conversation seemed. As he drove back toward the glittering towers of his world, Ezra's phone rang. The screen displayed his home number. Miriam was awake. He let it ring 4 times before answering. "Where are you?" Miriam's voice was thick with sleep and something else. Suspicion, perhaps, or fear. "Just driving," he said smoothly. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd clear my head." "Come home," she said after a pause. "Please. I had the dream again." Ezra's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I'll be there soon. Go back to sleep." "I can't," she whispered. The nursery door was open again. The nursery. A room filled with everything a child could need or want, updated regularly as fashions and technologies changed. A room that had never heard a child's laughter. A monument to absence. "I'll be home soon," he repeated, ending the call. In the rearview mirror, his reflection stared back with haunted eyes. For a moment, he thought he saw something else there too, a shadow that didn't match his movements. But when he looked again, there was only his own face, lined with the weight of secrets. 20 years earlier, dust coated everything in the small village where Ezra grew up. It settled on the thatched roofs, filtered through cracks in the mud brick walls, and clung to the skin and clothes of the children who played in the dirt roads. For Ezra Ademola, dust was the constant reminder of how little separated his family from the ground beneath their feet. His parents worked as servants in the sprawling compound of Chief Adeyemi, the wealthiest man in the region. His father tended the gardens and maintained the property, while his mother cooked and cleaned inside the main house. From dawn until well past dusk, they labored, returning home only to collapse into exhausted sleep before beginning again the next day. "Education is your escape," his mother told him each morning as she pressed his carefully ironed school uniform into his hands. The fabric was worn thin from years of washing, patched in places, but always clean. "Learn everything they try to teach you and more. Knowledge can't be taken from you like money or land." Ezra took her words to heart, studying with an intensity that alarmed his teachers. While other boys played football after school, he remained in the classroom, reading borrowed textbooks by the fading afternoon light. At night, he studied by the unsteady flame of a kerosene lamp, often until the fuel ran out. When he was 12, Ezra first entered Chief Adeyemi's mansion to help his father repair a broken fence. The opulence inside the main house stunned him into silence: polished marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture imported from Europe, and a television as large as a window. But what impressed him most was Chief Adeyemi's library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound books, many of them unread judging by their pristine spines. That night, Ezra told his parents, "I'm going to have a house like that someday, and a library bigger than Chief Adeyemi's." His father had smiled tiredly. Dreams are good, son. But remember where we come from. I don't care where we come from, Ezra replied with the certainty of youth. I care where I'm going. When Ezra was 16, his father collapsed while trimming the hedges on a particularly hot day. By the time Ezra's mother reached him, he was already gone, a heart attack, the doctor said later. Chief Adeyemi paid for a modest funeral and gave the family 1 month's extra wages as compensation. 6 months later, Ezra's mother developed a persistent cough. When she finally agreed to see a doctor, the diagnosis was tuberculosis, advanced beyond treatment. She died within weeks, whispering to Ezra with her final breath, "Rise above this dust, my son. Rise." At 17, Ezra stood before 2 fresh graves, alone in the world. Chief Adeyemi offered him his father's position as groundskeeper at half the salary since he was just a boy. Ezra refused. That night, he packed his few belongings, took his parents' meager savings, and boarded a bus to Lagos. The city was overwhelming, millions of people, endless noise, buildings that seemed to scrape the sky. Ezra slept in bus stations and cheap hostels, rationing his money while he looked for work and a way to continue his education. Eventually, he found both. During the day, he unloaded cargo at the docks. At night, he attended classes at a community college, studying business and economics. "You work like a man possessed," his supervisor at the docks commented once. "I made a promise," Ezra replied, not elaborating further. In his rare moments of rest, Ezra would climb to the roof of his boarding house and look out over the city toward the affluent neighborhoods with their gated communities and luxurious homes. From that distance, the lights resembled stars, cold, distant, but fixed points to navigate by. On the anniversary of his mother's death, he returned to those graves in the village. Kneeling in the familiar dust, he whispered, "I will never be poor again. I swear on your graves, I will rise so high that no one will ever look down on me again." As he spoke, a hot wind swept across the cemetery, sending dust swirling around him like a cocoon. For a moment, Ezra could have sworn he heard voices in that wind, not his parents, but something older and hungrier. Later, he would wonder if that was the moment his bargain truly began, if something had heard his desperate oath and marked him. But that day, he simply brushed the dust from his clothes and returned to Lagos, unaware that his words had rippled through realms beyond his understanding, creating echoes that would eventually return as a terrible answer to his oath. Ezra met Miriam on a Sunday morning at Christ Apostolic Church in Surulere, Lagos. He had gone not from any particular religious conviction but because churches were good places to make business connections. At 24, Ezra had completed his education and started a small trading business, importing electronic goods from China. The business barely sustained him, but he dressed as if it did, investing in one good suit that he maintained meticulously. Miriam sat in the choir, her voice rising above the others during the hymns. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, her features were too strong, her gaze too direct, but there was a warmth to her that drew attention. After the service, Ezra positioned himself near the exit, waiting until she passed before introducing himself. "Your voice," he said, "it reminds me of my mother's." It was not the smoothest opening, but its honesty surprised even him. Miriam looked at him curiously. "That's either the strangest compliment I've received or you're very close to your mother," she replied. "Was," Ezra corrected quietly. "She passed away 7 years ago." Something in Miriam's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. Would you like to join us for lunch? The choir always eats together after service." Lunch led to walks, which led to long conversations. Miriam taught elementary school, finding joy in shaping young minds despite the meager salary. She lived with her elderly aunt in a small apartment not unlike Ezra's own modest accommodation. "What do you want most in life?" Ezra asked her one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Miriam considered the question seriously. A family filled with love, children to teach and nurture, a home where everyone feels safe. She turned to him. "And you? What does the ambitious businessman want most?" Ezra watched the sunset reflect off the water. "To create something lasting. Something that can't be washed away by time or circumstance. Like a legacy," Miriam suggested. "Like security," Ezra corrected. "Absolute, unshakable security." Their courtship was brief by local standards, 6 months from meeting to marriage. The wedding was small, held in the same church where they met. Ezra had no family to invite. Miriam had only her aunt and a few cousins. Their honeymoon was a weekend at a modest beach resort, all they could afford. They moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a developing area of Lagos. The building was new but cheaply constructed, with water that ran only in the mornings and electricity that failed during the frequent power outages. Still, Miriam transformed the space with colorful fabrics, potted plants, and framed photographs. The most prominent photo was from their wedding day, Ezra in his good suit, Miriam in a dress she had sewn herself, both smiling with the certainty that life would only improve from that moment. "This is just our beginning," Ezra promised as they ate dinner on their small balcony the first night in their new home. "In 5 years, we'll be in a proper house. In 10, a P mansion of our own." Miriam laughed. "I don't need a mansion. Just this, you, me, and eventually our children." She took his hand. "But I believe in you, Ezra. Whatever you set your mind to, you achieve." Her faith warmed him in places long cold. For the first time since his parents' deaths, Ezra felt he belonged somewhere, with someone. The sensation was as terrifying as it was comforting. To have something precious was to have something to lose. That night, as Miriam slept beside him, Ezra stared at the ceiling and renewed his silent vow. He would succeed. He would give Miriam the life she deserved, the children she wanted, the security his parents never had. And he would do it before life could take this happiness from him, as it had taken everything else. The first business failed within 2 years. Ezra's electronics import company had grown steadily until a change in import regulations doubled his costs overnight. He tried to adapt, shifting to domestic distribution, but larger companies undercut his prices, and within months, he was forced to liquidate his inventory at a loss. "It's just a setback," Miriam assured him as they sold their television and her gold earrings, her only valuable possession, a wedding gift from her aunt, to cover the final month's rent on their business space. "You'll start again, smarter this time." Ezra spent weeks researching new opportunities before investing their remaining savings in a market stall selling second-hand clothing imported from Europe. The margins were good, and within 6 months, he had expanded to 3 stalls in different markets. Then came the rainy season, unusually severe that year. Flash floods swept through the largest market, destroying Ezra's main stall and most of his inventory. The other stalls supported them for a while, but without the capital to replenish stock properly, sales dwindled. By their 3rd anniversary, they had moved to a smaller apartment in a less desirable area. Miriam had taken on additional tutoring after school hours to supplement their income. Ezra worked 14-hour days, coming home exhausted but determined. "Maybe we should wait on trying for children," Miriam suggested gently one night. "Just until we're more stable." Ezra agreed, though the decision pained him. He had promised her a family, and each delay felt like another failure. His 3rd venture, a small convenience store in their neighborhood, showed promise initially. Ezra applied lessons from his previous failures, keeping overhead low and focusing on essential items with reliable demand. For 18 months, they worked side by side in the store, Miriam handling the accounts after her teaching day ended. They saved enough to move to a slightly better apartment, and Miriam tentatively began collecting items for a future baby, a small stuffed animal, a handmade blanket. Then 3 larger chain stores opened within a mile radius, offering lower prices than Ezra could match. Their customers dwindled. Ezra tried extending hours, offering delivery services, even selling homemade meals prepared by Miriam, but the decline continued. On the day Ezra admitted defeat and placed a "going out of business" sign in the window, Miriam discovered she was pregnant. "It's a sign," she said, holding Ezra's hand against her still flat stomach. "This child is coming to change our fortunes." Ezra smiled for her benefit, but inside, panic clawed at him. They had debt from the failing store, 3 months of unpaid rent on their apartment, and no clear path forward. How could he support a child when he could barely support his wife? That night, after Miriam fell asleep, Ezra sat at their small kitchen table, calculating and recalculating their finances until the numbers blurred before his eyes. No matter how he arranged them, the result was the same: they were sinking, and now there would be a 3rd life depending on him to stay afloat. In desperation, Ezra reached out to a former classmate who had succeeded where he had failed, building a thriving import-export business. The Mun agreed to meet and seemed receptive to Ezra's pitch for a partnership. For 2 weeks, Ezra prepared his proposal, researching market opportunities and drafting detailed business plans. He spent their last cash on a new shirt and tie for the meeting. The investor listened politely, asked thoughtful questions, then leaned back in his leather chair. "Your ideas are solid, Ezra. But your track record concerns me. 3 failures in 5 years. That suggests either bad luck or bad business sense. Neither makes for a good investment." "Everyone fails before they succeed," Ezra argued. "I've learned from each setback." "Perhaps," the Mun conceded, "but there are safer bets out there." "I'm sorry." Ezra left the office with the proposal folder still in his hand, the pages now feeling as worthless as the dreams they contained. Outside, rain began to fall, soaking through his new shirt. By the time he reached home, the ink on his carefully prepared documents had blurred into illegibility. Miriam was waiting, her expression hopeful until she saw his face. She didn't ask how the meeting went. Instead, she silently helped him out of his wet clothes, made him tea, and held him as he finally broke down. "I've failed you," he whispered against her shoulder. "I've failed our child." "No," Miriam said firmly. "You haven't failed until you stop trying. We still have each other. We'll find another way." The next morning, an eviction notice was taped to their door. They had 30 days to pay or leave. To be continued. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, drop your comments, and share with your loved ones. See you in the next video.